Hi, welcome to the video. My name is Dychronic, and today I wanted to talk about my top 10 PvE specials in Destiny 2. And of course, as always, I have made a spreadsheet for this video. All of its beautiful dark theme, color code, information, recommendations, and of course the DPS spreadsheet stuff that you all know and love. If you want to get your hands on it, still at my Discord server, link in the description down below, in the channel hashtag spreadsheets docs. And if you don't see it, just verify with the bot. And hey, if you're feeling bad today, here's some cute animals on screen. So while you're brainwashed, I wanted to tell you something that's really important. Spreadsheets like this would really not be possible without support of my patrons on Patreon. I know you've heard this 1,000 times, but truly, these spreadsheets take a really long time, especially the DPS calculation ones, always going back and forth, mismeasuring, retesting stuff, takes a long time. This one specifically was a real big pain in the butt. So if you like these spreadsheets, you like the work that's going into this, please consider checking out my Patreon, link in the description down below. Even if you can do $3, $5 a month, it really does help a lot. And if you haven't seen it already, I actually have a giveaway going on right now. Astro A10 headset and a Blue Yeti microphone, completely free, and a bunch of different ways to enter, link in the description down below. Moving on, let's go ahead and get into it. On screen right now, this is my spreadsheet. All of its beautiful dark theme, color-coded information about catalysts, about quests, about recommendations for legendary options for all the different variations of weapons, and of course, on the right side, we can see all the DPS stuff. So the DPS, the full ammo damage, the crit percentage, the crit multiply. We got a lot of beautiful things out here that can really help you understand how certain weapons are performing. Keeping in mind that I'm like one guy, so there's gonna be some mistakes on here, so just keep that in mind. And clearly, if you just want to know the top 10, they're on screen. They're on the actual spreadsheets themselves. You can go and get them very easily, but the reasons why they're placed the way they are, what they're specifically used for, is going to be very important, how they fit in the meta. So what we're going to do is go through each of the categories of weapons, like fusion rifles and shotguns and snipers, and talk about the best of the best within them and how they're performing and what they're used for. There's going to be some stuff here that probably surprises you. First up, let's talk about the Glaives. Now, the Glaives are kind of back and forth. When it comes to their actual damage output, they're not really that successful. They don't do a lot of damage and they're a bit slow. Technically, where the Glaives shine is gonna be with the artifact mods. The fact that you can suppress enemies from a Glaive shot, which there's a number of bonuses that you get from suppressing enemies, like going invisible as the Hunter. These are gonna be the best parts of the Glaive, and they definitely need some tuning, because after this season, I can't imagine they'll be used nearly as much. And on top of that, the exotic Glaives are such a pain to get, and they are absolutely not worth it, according to most of the people I talked to. Up next, I wanted to talk about the trace rifles, and there are a number of different trace rifles in this game with a number of very unique bonuses. Now, generally, trace rifles are essentially just higher damage auto rifles with some flashy Spanish. I don't know why I said Spanish. Ah yes, the Spanish, very fast. They all do something different, but in my opinion, there's only two that are worth talking about. First of all, Divinity at number 7, because you can weaken a target at range, create a massive crit spot, and it has overload rounds, which is literally the only overload rounds exotic weapon in the game. If you don't know, we have like 4 for Unstoppable, but 1 for overload. I don't know why. The other one being Aegir's Scepter. If you get the catalyst rolling, you could do some pretty insane DPS. Keeping in mind, this is for a short period of time, on top of being able to create slows and freeze across the battlefield, create stasis crystals. For all your stasis subclass teammates, it can be very useful, but is somewhat niche, and is definitely a high-level option. Keeping in mind that regular Aegir's Scepter without the catalyst activation is much, much lower, but still a decent option. Definitely a Spanish option. I can't wait for people in the comments to be like, as a Spanish person, I can confirm we are fancy. Okay, alright, okay, buddy, alright. What do you think you are, Spanish? Sheesh. Up next, let's take a look at snipers. Now, most people know snipers and understand them. They're high skill, high reward. They have a high crit modifier. They're used at very long range. They reward high skill play with headshots, but they're very punishing, and they don't really have that high DPS or full ammo damage. I personally don't use them that often, but sometimes in a Grandmaster, they can have some uses. When it comes to the best archetype of legendaries, I personally prefer the 72 RPMs, as they usually have more full ammo damage. Even if they have slightly less DPS, that's not really why you're using a sniper. When it comes to the exotic options, things like Cloud Strike and Izanagi are probably going to be the best performers. Cloud Strike having some pretty impressive DPS if you can get 100% crit ratio, which puts it all the way up here in the very, very high heights. That being said, you're unlikely to get 100% crit unless there's a divinity on the target. The more likely scenario is Izanagi's Burden, which can be used in Grandmasters, it can be used in raids, it can be used for fun. This thing is an absolute cannon with its honed edge ×4 with the catalyst, and just performs really well at what it needs. Up in the next category, category, we have the grenade launchers. This season, we got 3 new wave frames, including the Dead Messenger, which is a triple wave frame, just shoots out 3 waves from its shot, and a lot of people really like these kinds of weapons. And although I do like them, I do think that they're fun in the highest level play. If you look at the full ammo damage, the DPS, they really just don't measure up to a lot of the lightweight frames. That being said, I don't think that they're bad weapons, but I prefer to airburst, I prefer to have more DPS and full ammo damage, and I prefer to have that impact on my enemy. When it comes to the exotic options, in my opinion, the Wither Horde takes the cake, especially when you consider its full ammo damage. If you can see here, that's 2.3 million damage, compared to some of these other options that are usually around like 400 to 700,000. 2 million damage. Let me just show you. This is Wither Horde. All 3 of those spikes, that is Wither Horde. There is no competition when it comes to full ammo damage, and that deserves a number 2 position, because in Grandmasters, you want full ammo damage. On top of being able to shoot somebody with a Wither Horde or lay a Wither Horde on the ground for enemies and then swap to another weapon. Wither Horde is just so darn useful. On top of having auto-loading, which is so simple, but just so very useful. Pro tip, if you can get auto-loading on a special or a heavy weapon, it's almost always the best choice. Not always, but almost always. Moving on, in the next category, we have the shotguns. Now, the shotguns are probably one of the more popular archetypes of weapons. They've been dominating for a long time, and there's a number of varieties of shotguns that may fit your playstyle better. When it comes to the best archetype of legendaries, I usually prefer the slug shotguns still to this day. Even after they got a little bit of a damage nerf and the other shotguns got a bit of a buff, I still find these slugs, especially once you get used to them, a lot more satisfying and a little bit more consistent. Keeping in mind the slug shotguns are on a 1.75 multiplier, and most of the other ones are at a 1.1. So if you're using a pellet, just shoot the enemy in the body. You're gonna do more damage on average. And this season, we even got a new shotgun, the Fortissimo, which finally has Vorpal for the kinetic slot shotgun over recombination of Heritage. So we now have a contender for the kinetic slot, which does do pretty well. When it comes to the other shotgun options, something like Duality is doing a lot better than it used to. It got a buff last season and this season, which made its damage output and DPS go extremely high, because you no longer break on Black Wings with a reload. You can do a very consistent output of damage against a single target. Beyond that, a lot of the other ones are a little bit gimmicky. Lord of Wolves and Fourth Horseman, they're just too fast, not really that controllable. And of course, the biggest issue with shotguns is that you have to be very, very close range. The slug shotguns having the biggest advantage of range, allowing them to be the safest in the higher level play outside of that slam range of bosses. That being said, I actually really like the adjustments they did to the other shotguns, and they're worth using again. Especially that of the lightweight frames, which the 7 Seraphs UQC-12 has trench barrel and auto-loading and is still my go-to shotgun option. Up next, probably one of the more popular options these days is going to be fusion rifles. Especially last season when we were doing double damage with particle deconstruction, these things were essentially disgracing all of the other options. However, even this season without PD or unstoppable bonus for fusion rifles, I still think they're some of the best options in the game. And when it comes down to the archetype, I still see the rapid fires as the de facto choice. You look at the full ammo damage, the DPS, and compare that to the other fusion rifles, it's better DPS and equal or better full ammo damage. I still don't understand how Bungie allows something like that. If you have fast fire rate, you cannot have the highest DPS and the highest full ammo damage. Now, given they obviously have a little bit less range, they have plenty of range for what you're going to use them on. Beyond that, I would also recommend you don't overlook something like Bastion. It's possible that I may have mismeasured it last season on top of the buffs that they did give to it, and it has a very impressive full ammo damage and DPS for an unstoppable built-in weapon, which is excellent. And lastly, we have the Merciless, which is something that people overlook all the time, but has some of the highest DPS in the game and full ammo damage in the game as an exotic fusion rifle. That's really good. And lastly, we have Deliverance, the first ever kinetic fusion rifle, technically a stasis weapon, but in the kinetic slot, did underperform. And I tested this multiple times, and it's kind of, I think, glitched, but it's still obviously the only option for legendary fusion rifles in the kinetic slot. And not a bad weapon, just not as good as it should be, I think. And finally, for the last category, we have at number 1, Ariana's Vow and Arbalest. In my opinion, two sides of the same coin. The weapons are both used for a similar purpose. First of all, Ariana's Vow. It has built-in barrier rounds, just like with Arbalist. It's very good at long range, while also being very nice at close range because of its aim assistance cone. Has built-in autoloading and a larger magazine into the catalyst. Has more damage with its first glance perk, so it rewards high skill gameplay. And in general has decent DPS and decent full ammo damage. It's just one of those do-all weapons in the highest level play that I've been using since Shadowkeep, which is, oh my god, 2 years ago. And the Arbalist is the other side of the coin, is the kinetic version. It is, again, built-in barrier rounds. It's very comfortable at long range, although a little punishing at close range, and very high crit modifier on it makes it a little bit difficult to use. It has the ability to absolutely slaughter enemy shields even on match game. You're able to break those shields and of course get a benefit from that from shield disrupt and do more damage to those targets, making it an ideal option for solo play or for match game stuff. And I know that there's plenty of people just trying to argue one thing or the other. Arbalist is better, Ariana's is better, but like, why? You don't have to be rivals. They're just brothers. One is kinetic, one is energy. They're both amazing for what they do. Although if we're gonna be honest, I still think Ariana's probably a little bit better. Let's be honest, you know, it's got autoloading. I've mentioned many times I'm a whore for autoloading. I love autoloading, it's so good. Whew, that was a good one. This spreadsheet definitely took me quite some time. It was a lot of testing, and I redid all of the numbers this season so I can get a lot more accurate, and I really do hope you guys enjoyed and that you use the spreadsheets because it's something that I've always liked to see in games. And again, this would really not be possible without Patreon, so please, in the description down below, a link to my Patreon if you want to just give $3 a month. It really does make a big difference. And of course, I want to shout out some of my higher tier Patrons, specifically a big thank you to Mom and Dad, Kristen Thompson, Kellyanne, Ostruck, Jacob Berg, Monday, Stu Buckwins, and Unipanther, and Casey Reagan for their support on Patreon. And of course, I want to thank you for watching all the way to this part of the video. My name is Dychronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.